Hey, rSpace fans. Today we've got a technology flub that winds up catching a cheating partner. Maybe this one will end up as an episode on a show on Apple TV. Kind of where this got started. Let's check it out. Me, 34 male, with my wife, 32 female, of 5 years. I know she's cheating on me. I can't bring myself to confront her. I met my wife 7 years ago at a party. She was the out-of-your-league girl no one hit on, and I was the awkward boy in the corner trying not to stare. Eventually, she was introduced to me by the host. We bonded over a shared love of darts, went on a few dozen platonic outings together, and after one beer and darts-filled night a year later, we wound up in her bed and in a relationship. A year later, she proposed to me. She's the power person in our relationship. I'm working as a chocolatier. She's a vice president in a larger corporation. She works long days and longer nights. I cook and keep the house clean, and work 5 days a week in a small artisanal shop downtown. We're pretty high-end, so I'm making good money, but she's making way more than twice my salary. So she buys the toys for the house, including a new set-top box for the TV. The set-top box has a screensaver mode where it rotates pictures in your Apple photo library. Last week, she was still at work. I came home from my day, and the TV, which I'd used to watch a YouTube video that morning and definitely had turned off, was on screensaver. On it were pictures that must have come from her phone showing her in our living room, one of our female friends, and a guy I've never met in very explicit poses. The pictures moved around the room, so I think there must have been a fourth person taking pictures with her phone, but I didn't see that person. What was weird was that she was wearing a bandage on her right hand, something she'd done that morning after complaining about RSI. I left the TV on and was very shocked, but decided to leave the screensaver and see what she had to say when she came home later that evening. When she came home, the pictures seemed to have disappeared. They haven't shown up any more since then on the TV. I asked her if she'd been home during the day because the TV was on, and she said she'd come home during lunch to pick up a USB stick she'd forgotten in her computer at home. I tried to ask her about the pictures, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Now, I have to add something. I'm not a very experienced person in sexual matters. I'm an introvert and barely had relationships before her. Our sex life is, though, even from my experiences, very vanilla. I have never had oral sex in my life before, and only twice since we met. Suggesting it to her usually meant that she'd lecture me about not doing those things, and sex for the night was a no-go. In those pictures, she did all the things she never wanted to do with me. Since that day, I have tried to confront her a number of times. She stays out longer, lately, not just since last week, for the past 4 months maybe, and she's often too tired for anything romantic, even just cuddling. And when she comes home, she often disappears in her office and comes to bed long after I've fallen asleep. But even during the time we had together, like this weekend, I can't bring myself to confront her. I am worried about what I might hear and what this would mean for our relationship. I still love her very much and can't imagine a life without her. How can I summon the courage to do this? Is there a way out of this? Before we get into the update, I just want to say that I'm very sorry, OP. Given that there were multiple people and pictures, it seemed like a premeditated event. I don't think your relationship is going to recover. I normally wouldn't advocate doing this over a text, but if you're having a lot of trouble even getting time to talk to her, text her. Just tell her you saw the pictures of her having sex with other people and need to talk to her. It would be best, however, if you see a lawyer first. It sounds like not only does she have the financial power, but also most of the emotional power in the relationship, and I don't want her to spin your head around and make you doubt everything. Alright, time for the update. So, lots to tell. First off, however, a few things. Before I wrote this, I didn't know what a red pill was. Now I do. I kind of wish I didn't, but a few dozen messages kind of made that happen. You know those debt solution letters you get when you're known to the county to owe money? That's how those things came in, fast and furious. Some others assumed that my throwaway having the word red in it meant that I was a sock puppet for them. I am not. I don't think they've got a solution that isn't worse than the problem it pretends to fix. Well, what happened? I left the house that evening for a walk. She wasn't home, and called around for lawyers. It was pretty late already, and I got a lot of voicemail, but one picked up. She asked me to get my financial statements and a lot of other things together and see her the next morning. I then decided to confront my wife that evening. That didn't happen. She came home very late and disappeared to take a bath almost right away. I snuck into her office and took her phone out from her purse. It had a fingerprint scanner, but her PIN was the same as she uses for the garage and our safe, which she has set up. So that was easy. There was nothing on the phone that I could find. Pictures and Apple Photos and Google Photos were all from things we'd done together, and some for her job. No messages or so either. Just as I wanted to put the phone back, her bag buzzed. She has another phone. That one is an Android and had a pattern, so I couldn't log in. But on the screen was a message, phone number only, no name, with a less than 3 on it. Put that back. Decided to postpone confrontation until after lawyer, but took a photo of the message. Next morning, I talked to the lawyer, and she spent about half an hour to just go over possible outcomes and what I can expect next. Then another 45 minutes talking about finances and so. We don't have kids, and she's the big earner, so I stand to either be just out of the relationship or be out and owed some money. It'll be months, maybe even more than a year, until all this is dealt with. Takes 5 minutes to marry, a year to unmarry it seems. I walked by my work and told my boss that I was sick. I looked like crap from not sleeping and some crying, so that was pretty convincing. We work in food. Being sick is a bad idea at that job. Went home and unplugged the Apple TV and took it to a friend who runs a small computer store. He confirmed what you told me. The pictures on the screensaver are from her Apple Photos. He's also the first I told, and he immediately offered me to stay at his place with his wife and kids if I had to leave for a while. Then he called the number the text on my wife's other phone came from and told me a guy named Rob had answered it. Walked home and texted her if she'd be home for dinner. She texted back that she'd have to do some extra work and it could be late. So I told her to please make an exception and come home. I had important news. We'd been looking for a house for a while. I figured she'd think I finally found one. Well, dinner came and went, and she didn't show. She came home around 10, smelling of cigarettes. She was all happy and asked me what I wanted to talk about, so I asked her to sit down. I'm 99% to making something up about a house and avoid the confrontation, but then, I guess for the first time, I felt a little anger. So I told her. I said, I know you've been cheating for a while now. I've been working with an attorney, and we'll have to talk about these things at some point, so now is as bad a time for that as ever. She didn't blow up or deny it. She just deflated and started to shake. A lot of your PMs, my attorney, and my friend all told me not to press for details and not put that on me as well. But I really wanted to know. So I said, tell me about Rob. She told me they'd met through Anne, the friend on the couch with her, and Anne wanted to have sex with him while he had a crush on my wife. So they hatched this threesome plan. That was 14 months ago. Apparently, they've since included Rob's wife, that's the mysterious fourth person who took the pictures, who is polyamorous with that Rob guy. The picture thing was solved too. She'd handed the wife her phone to take a few pictures and didn't remember the whole screen blanker thing. When she was at work, she'd uploaded them and deleted them from her phone. By then, by chance, I'd seen them. She had the second phone for precisely the reasons I thought, as one that isn't on our shared contract where I couldn't see the incoming and outgoing calls in my statement. She also had short affairs with other women and a few men. And most of her weekend work things were actually her and Rob going on short trips together. Through all this, it felt like she was giving me as much detail as she could in an effort to hurt me, and it worked, but I think I kept a pretty good poker face. I told her that I would leave the house, that I had photographed and cataloged everything and was hoping for an amicable separation. She simply declined, told me she'd leave and take a hotel for the time being, and put her keys on the table. She packed a few things and left. That was it. And this one guy, /you J Luster, says, it was like the dentist. It hurt less than I thought it would, but still hurt a whole lot. Today, I have about 15 missed calls from her and 150 messages, all asking me for forgiveness and if we could make it work again. I agreed to meet her next week, but only to divide our possessions. As far as I'm concerned, this is over. Except for my one friend, no one knows yet, and I want to wait with making it public knowledge while I sort my stuff here and decide how I go from here. Might actually be hitting the gym, no intentions for a rebound relationship, and the rest, we'll see. She didn't feel bad about doing it. She's been doing it for over a year. She feels bad because she got caught. She threw out all that crap she did to OP to hurt him and make him feel badly about himself. If she actually felt sorry, she would have stopped out at the first time and told him, not gone to the point where she bought another phone. The amount of effort that went into cheating emphasizes how awful she is. I just feel so bad for you, OP. I can't imagine going through that. Good luck to you. My 29 male ex-fiance, 29 female, cheated on me 4 years ago. I picked myself up and came back stronger than ever. This happened some time ago, but I thought I'd share it in the hopes of showing people who have been destroyed by infidelity that your world is not over and that things can only get better from here on out. Disclaimer: names and some minor details have been changed for identity protection purposes. I met my ex-fiance, let's call her Jane, 7 years ago in a coffee shop. I was standing behind her in a long, slow-moving queue, and we just started talking. We hit it off immediately, and even sat and drank our coffee together for about an hour. We eventually exchanged numbers before going our separate ways. At first, I was very hesitant to get serious with her because I had just started as an analyst at a large investment bank, and the hours were absolutely brutal. Think 70-80 hours a week when things were slow, and up to 120 plus when we were on live deals. I had also heard many relationship horror stories from my fellow junior colleagues about how all of their relationships had failed due to the crushing hours and not being able to see their significant others on a consistent basis. However, after a few dates with Jane, it was clear that I was falling for her and that she had felt the same way about me. I brought up my concerns about my work hours causing our relationship to fail, and she told me that she really liked me, how it would be a shame if we didn't even try, and that if we stayed committed and were understanding towards one another, any storm could be weathered. She was true to her word. The next 3 years were filled with Everest-like highs and hellish lows, but we persevered. She was patient and understanding and never made me feel guilty about all the super late nights spent at work and not with her. She showered me with love, care, and affection, and often told me how grateful she was to be with an amazing person like me. I, in turn, did everything humanly possible to love her like she deserved to be loved. To everyone's surprise, after the end of this 3-year period, we were going stronger than ever, whilst all my fellow analysts' relationships crumbled and burnt. During this period, I decided that the time was right for me to start recruiting for private equity roles. If successful, my hours would be drastically reduced and my already insanely high pay would increase even further. I also decided that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Jane, this amazing woman who had stuck with me even through the sucky banking years as a junior. I bought a ring and proposed to her while we were on vacation in Spain. She said yes, and I was on top of the world. Now, this is the part where everything goes to crap. She was in the shower one day and had left her phone on the bedside table. I had just the slightest urge to snoop. At this point, she had done nothing at all that would lead me to suspect that she was cheating, and I had had no gut feelings that something was up and whatnot. I just had a slight urge, and it's not like she was ever going to find out that I had snooped. Long story short, I snooped and found a name, female, in her chats that I didn't recognize. I clicked in, and what I saw simultaneously enraged me and broke my heart. Lots of sweet nothings, nudes, etc., even some texts of them comparing the size of my manhood to his. What made all of this worse was that he looked to be taller than me and was far better looking than me. I'm 5'9" and only slightly above average in looks department. I was shaking quite badly and feeling so sick that I put the phone down and went out to have a breather. My thoughts were racing as I strolled down the pavement. My first thought was that maybe this was my fault and that she just wanted to feel loved and I couldn't give her as much attention as she needed due to my work. Pathetic, right? I wanted to confront her when I got back, but I was afraid because I loved her dearly and my confronting her might ruin us. My thoughts continued running wild, ranging from, hey, this isn't that bad, right? It's just a couple of texts. It's not like they had sex. You just have to put in a little more effort and she'll love you again. To, how dare she do something so disgusting to you behind your back? I ultimately decided that I needed more proof before making a decision, as if the texts weren't enough. I went and bought a small camera and hid it among some stuff atop a shelf in the corner of our bedroom. I activated it the next day before going to work. Later that night at around 10, I activated the camera and saw exactly what I was hoping not to, but expecting to see. Her getting railed by the guy she was sexting on her phone. All hopes of reconciliation and any love that I still had for her was thrown out of the window instantly. I threw up in the bathroom and immediately left the office for my best friend's, let's call him Owen's house. when I broke down and cried harder than I have ever cried in my 25 years of existence. When I had calmed down, me and Owen sipped on stiff scotch and planned my next move after I was done venting. We talked throughout the night until the next morning when we both had to leave for work. He suggested that I don't confront and end my engagement to Jane outright, but instead act cordial around her until I had found a new job, hopefully in private equity, and a new flat, then block her phone, email, and all forms of social media, etc., and move out while she's at work. One day, I'd be kissing her goodbye in the morning, and next I'd be gone like I never existed. That would hit her like a truck, he told me. I was 100% on board with this plan, but I told him that I'd prefer to move to a whole new continent, probably in New York, where I'd truly be gone. He told me he'd miss me if I did so, but if that was what I felt was necessary, he'd support my decision. I trudged into work like a zombie later that day, but the massive weight weighing me down had been lifted considerably. The next month was the most difficult that I had ever had to endure. Being around Jane any time I was at home and having to act normal was excruciatingly painful. I could barely look her in the eyes without feeling the urge to physically harm her, but I managed to put on a brave face and act affectionate towards her. We even had sex a few times, which left me feeling disgusting and weak. We had told everyone that we were engaged, and when she brought up the wedding, I lied that we might have to wait a few months as things were heating up at work and I would be overwhelmingly busy. I gave the same answer to the hordes of mutual friends and family who were now calling to wish us congratulations. I broke down in the office toilet a few times late at night, knowing she was probably sleeping with a affair partner at that very moment. It was a miracle that I managed to hold out for as long as I did. Me staying at the office as late as possible or just walking around the city when I finished earlier than usual helped. Meanwhile, I was reaching out to headhunters in New York, hoping to recruit for private equity associate roles there while simultaneously studying for their LBO modeling tests. I'd also told my other close friends what I was planning to do, and they all told me they'd support me 100% no matter what I decide. After a few weeks of interviews with headhunters, I had a few interviews with New York-based private equity firms lined up. Everything was going just as planned. But this isn't a fantasy world, this is life. And life soon threw me a curveball that shattered my plan completely, but not in the way that you might be thinking. I went out with Owen and another one of my friends. Let's call him Antoine. One Friday night, and we ended up mingling with a group of people that Antoine knew. Among them was one of the most beautiful girls I had ever seen. I talked to her for a bit, and we got on well. Her name was Elisa, and she was Swedish. She was absolutely stunning and looked like Elsa Hosk. She wasn't like Elsa Hosk's identical twin, but if you put them both side by side, you'd know who was Elsa and who was Elisa. But you get what I mean. We had a lot in common. Namely, she was doing her master's at my alma mater, and as a matter of fact, was doing the exact same program that I did, and that we both had grown up in Asia. I was planning to jet off to New York ASAP, but I just couldn't resist exchanging numbers with her. We ended up going on a few dates and sleeping together. I had never felt this wanted and understood by anyone before, not even by Jane in the early stages of our relationship. And for the first time in weeks, I was genuinely happy. One night, after sleeping together, we confided in each other our deepest feelings. She brought up how she was cheated on by her ex, I didn't prompt her, and how she hated and had absolutely no respect for infidels. I then explained to her my current situation, and she laughed, not at me, but in amusement and in awe at how I was going to drop a sledgehammer on Jane. She then asked me if there was any chance that I would stay and not leave to New York. I said I would consider it, but deep down, I no longer wanted to leave. I, of course, had no intention of getting involved with anyone, but Elisa was just so amazing, and I couldn't help but fall for her. Her views on infidelity also somewhat reassured me that she wouldn't ever betray me in such a horrible way like Jane did, should we end up together. What a massive curveball she was. Now, some may say this is cheating on Jane, and I'm just as evil as her now. I disagree with the former because she cheated first, so from that point on, I had no obligation to remain faithful to her any longer. I agree with the latter, I am a savage. After interviewing with multiple firms, I got an offer to join the New York office of a large private equity fund. After inquiring about joining the London office instead, the managing director put me in touch with his counterpart in London. 2 interviews later, I received and accepted the offer to join the London office. I was overjoyed. For anyone not in finance, an investment banker managing to make the leap to private equity is considered a massive step up. I held a small celebration at my flat after my first day at the new fund to commemorate this achievement. Owen, Antoine, and his significant other. Antoine had recently made the jump to private equity, and his significant other worked at the fund I had just joined. And another friend came. I asked Elisa to come too, and she gladly accepted. She came the latest, but when she showed up, she gave me a kiss and a hug, telling me how proud she was of me. I closed my eyes and held her for an extra second, savoring this moment. We sat around the island in my kitchen, talking, laughing, and just having a splendid time. Just then, Jane came home. It was 1 a.m. at the time. She could have had a busy day at work, but had most likely just finished sleeping with a fair partner. We glanced at the door to see who had just come in, but otherwise didn't acknowledge her presence. Everyone at the table knew precisely what was going on. Elisa had her hand around my shoulder when Jane got back, but didn't put it down. All of us just continued talking and not letting Jane's presence disrupt our good vibes. Jane tried inserting herself between me and Elisa, quite awkwardly I might add, but ended up having to sit on my other side. We continued our conversation, pretending that Jane wasn't there. I ignored her too, and had my body turned towards Elisa the whole time. I could sense that Jane was extremely uncomfortable. At around 2, everyone decided to pop off to go home and get some sleep. I opened the door and showed everyone out, then after some deliberation, put on my shoes and followed them. Jane asked me where I was going with a tinge of worry in her voice. "I'll be back in a bit," I responded and closed the door before she could respond. I woke up around 8. Elisa was still asleep next to me, so I just planted a small kiss on her head and headed home to carry out the final stage of my new plan. I had silenced my phone before going to bed because it was blowing up with text messages and calls from Jane. When I got home, Jane was sitting at the island looking dejected. Her eyes and nose were red from crying. If this was before she had betrayed me, my heart would have broken for her, and I would have done anything to cheer her up. But after what she had done, I felt nothing, not even a shred of sympathy. "Where were you?" she asked. "I fell asleep in the car," I replied. I didn't own a car, but at that point, I didn't even care if my answers were incoherent. Gotta freshen up and get to work. I then hopped into the shower. I got out and put on my suit, then realized she had to feel at ease if she was to leave for work, and she couldn't be at home if my plan was to succeed. All dressed up, I got out of the room, approached Jane, and gently placed my hand on her cheek. "Look," I told her in a gentle tone whilst looking into her eyes, "I have to go to work now, but I promise I'll come home earlier today and talk about this, okay?" I then kissed her forehead gently and told her I loved her. That was the last fake, sincere kiss I ever gave her, and was glad that I never had to do it again. The final stage of my new plan was to move out and ghost her, but instead of moving to New York, I would now be moving into the new and vastly more luxurious flat compared to my current one that I had secured the previous week in an affluent neighborhood near the city center. I had taken a day from work to move out because weekdays were when Jane was away from home for the longest and most consistent period of time. I met up with Owen and Antoine for breakfast at a nearby restaurant. They too had taken a day to help me out. When we were done, I checked her location on my phone, and sure enough, she was at work. We went back to my old flat and packed all of my things that I hadn't moved to Owen's flat into his car and left. I did feel a little sad leaving the flat that I had called home for the past 3 years, but this was a new beginning, and change isn't always easy. The lease on the old flat was in my name, and it expired in 2 months. But with my new salary, 2 months worth of rent at the old flat was nothing to me. Besides, paying 2 months worth of rent to have my traitor of a fiance's life fall apart was quite the bargain. After I moved out, life was incredible. My new job was amazing, and I was enjoying myself. I had a lot more free time now. I started boxing regularly again and actually had time to sleep at night. My friends thought I looked a lot healthier and happier. I felt that way too. Me and Elisa made our relationship official, and we were extremely happy together. She even managed to get an offer to join a different private equity fund straight out of school, which is a very impressive feat. I can say that I was happier than I had ever been since leaving school. As for Jane, my disappearance hit her like an uppercut to the chin that she didn't recover for a long time. All of my friends were bombarded at one point with messages and calls from her asking about me. I had blocked her from everything, phone, social media, etc. She still had the engagement ring I gave her, but my plan wouldn't have been much of an uppercut if I had asked for it back. As for her relationship with a fair partner, I never found out, nor did I care to find out what happened to them. If he wanted her, he could have her. Trash always ended up together in a pile. One day at work, after a morning meeting, I was walking back to my cubicle when I was greeted by an unsightly guest, a livid Jane standing between me and my cubicle. She lunged forward and started attacking me, streams of expletives and vitriol coming out of her mouth while she tried to slap me in the face. I deflected her blows easily. My cubicle mate, Chiara, and another colleague hurriedly restrained her. She fell onto her knees, sobbing and droning on. "I was so worried. I missed you. Where did you go? I love you. How could you do this to me?" I calmly took out my phone, found the videos of her and AP getting it on, and played it, shoving the phone in her face. I still find myself laughing at the look of horror on her face when I think of it sometimes. She started hyperventilating. "Look," she said through her heavy breathing. "I can explain. It's not what it looks like." I couldn't help but burst out laughing the timeline. It's not what it looks like. It was clearly her getting effed by another guy that wasn't her fiancé. I wanted to yell at her and rub all the BS that she'd done to me in her face. But in reality, it had come across as me trying to convince her that she did something egregiously wrong. She knew full well that she had effed up big time, and the guilt was already consuming her. "OP, look at me," she continued softly. "I love you. I will always love you. As long as the sky is blue, I will love you." Here in London, the sky's always gray, I quipped back with a straight face and a smug tone. Chiara covered her mouth with her hand, stifling a laugh. Jane's tears were still in free flow as security intervened and escorted her out of the office. Another dose of karma hit Jane literally an hour later. I had arranged to meet with Elisa for lunch. When I got to my building lobby, she was already waiting for me. We kissed, then walked hand in hand towards the exit and right into Jane's bewildered face. There was an awkward pause with the three of us staring at each other. Jane proceeded to fall on her knees, again, and started bawling. Probably just jealous that I'd left her for someone far more beautiful, or probably just consumed by guilt and regret. I'd never know, and frankly, I don't care to know. Me and Elisa just sidestepped her and walked out into the open. The rest of this story involving Jane just has to do with engagement and her friends and family, but that's a story for another time. As for me, life is still amazing. I was given the nod for VP, Vice President, promotion at my fund last month, and I'm on track to make partner before I turn 40, hopefully. Elisa has become my new fiancée. I proposed to her last summer, and she tearfully accepted. We love each other dearly. We plan to get married when the pandemic is over and are already talking about having children together. The new lockdown really sucks for everyone, but we are very fortunate to have each other to count on during such trying times. That's my story, guys. I just wanted to share this in order to show that if you're a victim of infidelity, it's not the end of the world. You can always bounce back, level up, and reach new highs that you never thought possible. Have a great day, everyone.